I've just had a chat with Nicole Craveiro, who shares her incredible story of her mum's suicide attempt and how that really opened her eyes to HR practices and how companies aren't being as approachable and supportive as possible for their employees. And so we just had a good chat looking at how things could be better and how mental health issues need to be addressed more effectively in the workplace. And so it's eye-opening story, and I really look forward to sharing this with you. So let's dive in. Hi, ladies. Today we are having a chat with the awesome Nicole Craveiro. She's the founder of CraveHRO, an HR consultancy that values compassion and mental health awareness in the workplace. Nicole, like many, if not all of us, has experienced obstacles in her personal life which can drastically affect your business life. Today we talk to her about how she managed to transform these experiences into her mission, ensuring that the corporate world acts as a pillar of support for those facing mental health challenges. No one should be unsupported in the workplace, and as a mental health certified HR professional, Nicole equips others with the skills to support those in crisis. So welcome, Nicole. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
I love your background. It looks gorgeous.
Thank you. I'm a
So,
little bit of a Harry Potter
really?
nerd. Yes.
So today we're going to be chatting about your incredible journey, and we're going to start with some difficult stuff. So please, feel free to share as much or as little as you want to. We just want to encourage those who might be going through something similar, or even encourage companies who might not realize that they need to have a bit more compassion in their workplace. So we know that Crave HRO was born from personal tragedy. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So in the summer of 2022, my mom unfortunately attempted suicide. Um, the warning signs were there. I just did not know how to handle that situation. Um, so when that happens, I had to take some time off from work, and I, sorry, I had to take some time off from work to take care of my mom.
Mm.
And I went out on a leave of absence. And unfortunately, I was terminated from my position. And I didn't really have the capacity to take care of my mom and look for another job. So I
Mm.
had my small business, and I really leaned into that to as kind of a safety net,
Yeah.
um, in order for me to be able to support myself while taking care of my mom.
So that must have been an incredibly challenging time for you, having to deal with something that you've never had to deal with in your life, um, and yet still provide for yourself. Were you able to build your business? Did you have some clients in your business, or was this something that you had to build from the ground up?
So I had already had the foundation built, but I was able to grow it, um, triple my business in the first 3 months. And I really depended on the support of my professional networking community
Mm-hmm.
to build that business, and lean into the relationships that I've already made, within my networking groups and my business community. And then within the first year, I kind of turned my pain into purpose and
Mm.
was able to recoup my corporate salary.
Wow, that's actually incredible. I love what you said there about turning your pain into purpose, because the pain can knock you out. It can take you out and it could send you down to a very dark place, can't it? And I'm sure you were in a very dark place for a while as well, but you were able to turn that around, which is phenomenal. Looking at your HR business, and you were in HR prior to this tragedy, um, do you feel that this tragedy changed the way you viewed HR?
I don't think it changed the way that I viewed. HR, but it did change the way that I viewed the workplace as a whole. A lot of times people don't want to talk about things that might be uncomfortable to talk about.
Mm,
People say suicide like it's a bad word,
mm, mm,
but it's really something that needs to be spoken about more so that when people feel that they're alone and they have um, no support, that they feel comfortable bringing it to their attention of their employer. I mean, you spend the majority of your life at work, um, and they could bring their struggles to their employer, whether it's themselves or a family member that's struggling, um, and get the support that they need.
mm. I'm looking back at my corporate career many, many, many years ago. um, I've went through some significant personal and mental health challenges whilst at work. I would even sit crying at my desk sometimes, I just couldn't keep it in. I would never dream of telling anybody at work, or even I wouldn't even know who to go to, to discuss the challenges I was going through, and I wouldn't want to. Is that something that most people would feel, or is that just me?
No, I think that's completely normal way of feeling because there is such a stigma surrounding mental health and what might happen if you were to talk about it. Would you be looked at as less capable, um, as less able to do your job? And then there's always a fear that you'll be retaliated against by your employer. So it makes sense that people wouldn't want to share that, but by keeping it inside and not doing anything to get help, it's a problem.
Yeah, yeah. And so I imagine that's what your HR company is about, is changing that and making it easier for people, to be able to talk about personal things at work.
Yeah, I think that a large part of feeling supported is just being able to be your real self in
Mm,
any situation that you're in, whether that's work or personal. And I always say that if I can't do that, then it's not the place for me.
mm, mm, mm. I think we've got a long way to go before companies can be a safe place for people to really be themselves. This is my opinion, and again, I haven't been in a job in many years, so my personal experience might be a bit out of date. But I still don't think, looking back, I would want people to know my business at work. I want to go to work, put on a suit, and be a different person because it helps me cope. And then when I go home, I take off my suit, and then I can let it all out and deal with it. But if I had to deal with it 24/7, it would be too much. So sometimes
Mm.
not dealing with it at work actually just gives me a bit of a break from reality. I can just switch into this other person, this suit person, and then go home and be the jeans person. Um, is that healthy? Is that unhealthy? Do most people do that? Do few people do that?
I think that there's people feel like they have no choice but to do that.
That's true as well.
Because then if they show any type of vulnerability, they might be looked at differently.
Yeah.
And in the professional world, that can be not a good thing if your employer is not progressive or doesn't have passion or empathy for what you're going through.
Mm. I think in most cases, the employers would look at you differently. It changes the way people see you, and you don't want people to see you differently. So that's why you keep it in. So, does your business help employers to learn how to deal with people and not judge them and see them differently when they're struggling with mental health issues?
So I think that one of the biggest pieces here is you know having that knowledge on how to approach these situations.
Mm,
So like I had said, when my mom attempted suicide, I am kind of ashamed to say that I just shut down. um I didn't know how to address it appropriately. I didn't feel like that I um, was equipped with the right knowledge to know what to do. And what I do through my business is after I educated myself, I got mental health first aid certified. I became a American Foundation for Suicide Prevention volunteer, where I deliver a Talk Saves Lives program for workplaces, and I continuously try to gain more knowledge, so I can help as many people as I can, and then
Mm,
nobody would have to feel that they wouldn't be able to talk to me about how they're feeling. Um, and I think that that's a big piece, because it's just educating employers, educating employees on how to approach these situations and get employees the resources they need, um, to support their mental health challenges. So whether that's uh, investing in a employee assistance program where they would have access to counselors and referrals outside of that's in their network for insurance purposes, and help them find, because even finding a mental health counselor can be draining. um,
mm, mm,
the the industry as a whole right now, although we're learning to prioritize it, it's after COVID it's become saturated.
mm. So after your horrible experience with your mom, did that give your business a purpose? Did you feel like it kind of changed what you wanted to do with your HR business? Or were you already thinking along those lines?
um I would say that it didn't necessarily change what I wanted to do. I'm still doing the baseline um, HR compliance
Mm-hmm.
and providing guidance to employers in tricky situations. But it definitely shaped it. So it it really means like that I do not want to, or I want to work with employers who prioritize the health of their employees, because whether that's physical, mental, whatever, happy employees are what's going to make your workforce thrive.
Mm-hmm. And back to your experience when you were employed and going through something that you just weren't prepared for, what were the warning signs that you weren't being supported properly at work?
The beautiful thing about having my own business is that I was able to take the time that I needed to care for my mom. Um, and I was able to work when I could.
Mm,
So having my own business gave me the flexibility that I needed to be able to handle the situation that I was dealing with. Um, Whereas, you know, being employed, you're not necessarily afforded that. You're afforded what the employer gives you or what the state mandates.
mm, mm,
Um,
mm,
when you have your own business, you can control your own schedule. Um, and those first 3 months, when my mom was hospitalized, I wanted to make sure that she had everything that she needed when she came home to kind of reintegrate and to start again. So I renovated her entire apartment, made sure she was set up with everything that she needed, her mental health programs. I gave her the resources that, I wish I had had. Uh,
yeah.
so I think that was kind of the way that I was best able to cope with what was happening.
Yes, yes. I'm just going to read this question because I want to get it right. Your organization is rooted in your personal story. Is it ever draining to have such an entwined relationship between your work and an experience that must have been incredibly difficult for you?
No, I actually find it to be motivating,
Okay.
to be able to take something that was extremely difficult and use it to drive my mission forward. I find it to be something that I rely on to give my work meaning.
Mm-hmm. And you say that empathy is an indispensable element of leadership. What else would you say makes up a good leader?
I would say someone who is able to build relationships with their team in a way that fosters trust, um, someone who understands that the success of their team is what makes them successful, instead of really looking out for themselves, they look out for their team as a whole.
Mm-hmm. And looking back at your experience, if you were giving somebody else advice who were in your situation while you were employed, going through something horrific, um, what should they do? How should they approach their employer? How should they deal with it in the work setting? And we're
Mm.
going to ask the second part of that question, how the employer should deal with it. So first deal with the individual, but then we're also going to take a look at how the employer should respond and boundaries, etc.
Well, honestly, I can't answer that without knowing the dynamics of the workplace that they're in,
Yeah.
because different workplaces, whether they prioritize the well-being and family of their employees, if that is the culture of where you work, then my
Yeah.
answer is going to be different than if it's more or less empathetic leadership.
Let's look at both scenarios then, because what I really want to achieve is to help the listener, somebody going through something similar, to have some practical tools, like how can they deal with it. So if that's difficult to answer, why don't we break it down? If you're in a company that's supportive, how should they deal with it? If you're in a company who's not supportive, how should they deal with it? Perhaps break the answer down into two answers.
So if you are in a company that is supportive, um, you can go to someone you trust, like your supervisor, or if you are a manager, you can go to someone like me, or your boss, and have an open dialogue about what you're experiencing, whether it's yourself or your family, and then explore your options from there. If your company is not supportive, on the other hand, you might want to limit what you're sharing, in case you do have to fear retaliation,
Mm,
unfortunately.
mm, mm.
Um, you might want to reach out to outside resources to get guidance on how to approach the situation.
So, can you recommend any outside resources? Where can somebody go if they really can't open up at work? Where can they go?
Depending on their situation, they'd want to look into anything that their uh, locality would offer.
Mm.
So there's a lot of mental health programs, um, and not for profits or organizations that focus on mental health and wellness. And they would be able to give the employee, some sound advice on how to approach the situation that they're dealing with. Um, and of course, it depends on what the scenario is, but they would want to look into maybe their local Department of Labor and see what kind of accommodations or would be available to them.
Mm-hmm. Here in the UK, if I were to answer this question, I'd probably recommend Samaritans. I don't know if that's just a UK charity, but there's Samaritans.co.uk, and they are fantastic with helping.
Or what is that?
So it's just a hotline you can call up and you can get help if you're struggling with mental health issues, loneliness. If you're struggling, you give them a call. Uh, so they've got trained professionals behind a phone. There's Mind UK. Yeah. So, and I think because this is a global podcast, people are going to be tuning in from who knows where in the world. I think it will be very different on a country by country basis. And also how people can approach mental health issues, or the suicide of a loved one, or those sorts of things. I think it's so broad. I don't think we can give very good advice for how to deal with it depending on the country that you're based in.
Mhm. I think one
But
thing that's universal is, especially if someone's dealing with a loss, is giving them time to grieve. So, like bereavement
mm,
in the US, it's not mandatory for employers, at least in my state in New York.
mm,
Um, there's no federal bereavement leave requirement or anything like that. Um, and I think that's something that, I do handbooks, employee handbooks for my employers, and that's always the conversation that we're going to have is, do you want to offer a bereavement policy? And if so, how long is it paid? Is it unpaid? Who does it apply to? Like,
mm,
and
mm,
and it's not funny, but some employers will only give full-time employees bereavement leave. And like, I don't understand that, because the amount of hours you're putting in a week does not make your need for
ex-
bereavement.
exactly, yeah.
When you're defining the family members that this can apply to, it's typically immediate family only. But some people's situations, they don't, they, like, who are we as the employer to define the level of importance of
Mm,
someone's relationships?
yes. And it's tricky, I would say. So a big company, corporate, it won't put them out of business if they have somebody going through severe issues and they need time off. Smaller businesses, having a staff member needing time off versus having to balance the books and having to keep a business afloat, I think that could become a lot more tricky, for smaller businesses. Do you have any advice for smaller businesses on how they can care for somebody going through a difficult time or a mental health issue at the same time as not totally put themselves out of business because they're just giving them all the time off in the world? Like, do you have any advice for smaller businesses?
Everyone's situation is going to be different. Some people like to work through their grief because it helps them cope. Some people can't, because that they're struggling with dealing with that loss. And I think that it's important to remember, if your employees are coming to work with that on with that heaviness on them, they're not going to be performing at their fullest
Mm,
potential
mm.
anyway.
They could even do damage, can't they? Because if they're dealing in that with the anger phase, they could start lashing out at people or lashing out to clients, and so you know, there's making mistakes. Yeah.
Things of that nature. And at that point, what's more expensive? Giving them
Yes,
the time they need to get the help that they need, or having them to come to work not their best self?
that's so true. Yeah, that could really help small businesses weigh it up. You don't always think of it that way. What's the cost of a mistake in your business? What's the cost? What's the cost of having one of your staff members have a breakdown on a client? Because when you're grieving, you can't control when it's going to hit you and when you're just suddenly going to have a reaction of some sort. So, yeah, that's really good advice. Thank you. Now back to your business. So, who do you work with at Crave HRO? Who's your ideal client?
I work with small employers, I'm industry agnostic, but usually it's professional services businesses that I work with. Um, they're mostly under 50 employees. They don't need a full time HR person on site yet, but they want to have access to someone who knows how to navigate the intricacies of labor laws or delicate situations, to have like a neutral third party representing them.
And what's the big dream for your business? Where do you want to take it?
So eventually, I would like to have a team of specialists. So, because HR is such a broad
Mm.
realm of different functions. So, ideally, I would like to have specialists in each function and be able to provide my clients a team of specialists that they can call on in certain circumstances.
And when is it necessary for a small business to take on HR support such as yours? At what stage of business do you recommend we start considering taking on an HR company?
So I always tell my clients or prospective clients that you want to have the fire extinguisher before the fire.
That's really good.
Yeah. So if you are being proactive, you want to make sure that you're set up and compliantly and that you're doing things the right way. I would say from the get-go, you'll want to outsource someone like me. A lot of the times, when I come in to work with a client, they are either just getting started, they don't know how to hire employees, they don't have any policies and procedures, they're unfamiliar with the laws, and that's where I come in. And then on the flip side, there are clients that have been well established, but they've had someone in the HR position that maybe shouldn't be. So a lot of the times we're in small businesses, we're all wearing multi hats.
Mm.
So they'll have like a bookkeeper or a office manager um, taking on the HR function, but they're not uh, equipped to do that because
Mm.
HR is a full time job for me to keep up with everything that we need to, especially in the US with all of our states having different rules and having remote workforces more prevalent these days. um, it's hard for any person to be able to juggle multiple roles and stay on top of all of that. So
Mm.
that is usually when a client will call me and say, "Hey, I need some help with this."
Mm. And let's look at what you said about having a fire extinguisher before there's a fire. Um, what are the dangers of not having someone in HR in your small business? What are the dangers? What are the potential fires?
Well, there's always the possibility that you're not compliant. In the US, each state has different laws. So that comes down to, something as simple as what posters you're and posting notices that you're hanging in your office, because they're being updated constantly. What policies and procedures do you have in place? Are they compliant? Um, a lot of states are mandating sick time now, and there's certain intricacies with that if you're not um, implementing the policy exactly how it should be, if you were ever to be reported or audited by the Department of Labor, you can get hit with some pretty significant penalties.
Yeah. So it's a case of you don't know what you don't know. So ask an HR person why you need them, and then you'll explain, and then suddenly you realize the fire extinguisher is needed.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's a common mistake with startups or small businesses is You have a limited budget, and so you have to decide where you're going to cut costs and where you're going to spend money. And so I imagine your biggest challenge is convincing small businesses why they need to spend their money with you.
Yes. So I offer 4 different packages, and it's really each level involves what the client needs. It's designed to grow with the clients. But the minimum investment for my services is $1 a year. And
Mm.
if you think about what the alternative is, you know, is there any wood I can knock on? But I've never had a situation where a client has gotten sued by an employee. And, in situations where it's been a possibility, I've had the documentation and backup to prove that the employer did everything that they were supposed to.
Mm.
Um, Whereas if you don't have that support of someone like me, you might not know how to handle the situation. If you're handling it in a way that's considered like a best practice or in a way that's compliant. So when you think about the investment that you're making in someone like me, um, I mean, the alternative, if you don't do things the right way, can be significantly more costly.
Mm. And Women's Business Club, we're all about women, supporting women. Have you had any significant women in your journey?
Yes, absolutely. So I, wow, uh, a long, long time ago, when I first started my corporate journey, prior to me even getting into HR, I had joined this program called the Moxie Mentoring Foundation. So what it was is they took young women who are entering the workforce and paired them with seasoned business women who have been at it for a while. And that's actually how I first got interested in HR, because my mentor was a director of an HR consulting firm. So it was actually pretty cool. Last year, our local publication published an article, and they don't tell you who you're interviewing with, or who else they're interviewing, I should say. And when the article was published, I had been interviewed alongside my mentor
Oh, wow.
on this topic. And like, to me, that was like a full circle moment to see my
Mm,
face next to
mm.
hers in our local paper.
Yeah. It's so important, isn't it? Having that support, having somebody else who's ahead that's willing to invest in you. I find most women who have that get ahead, get ahead further and faster. So, Nicole, how is your mom doing today?
She has just moved in with me. So she had several more hospitalizations, a lot of ups and downs. So with her last hospitalization, they had recommended that she not live um, by herself anymore.
Mm.
So my tenants in my apartment in my house happened to be leaving at the same time that this was happening. So I said, you know what? I have the space. Let's, have her move in with us. And it's been 3 months now, and she's seems to be adjusting well. And it's nice to just know that I'm there for her
Mm. Mm.
every day.
Mm-hmm. Well, we wish her a speedy recovery. We hope that she finds keys to bounce back. And if there's anything Women's Business Club can do to support you, because when you're supporting somebody else, you also need support. You know where we are. That's why we exist. We're here so that we can not only talk about business but support each other in life. And so, we're here for you and your mum. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing your story and her story with us today. And yeah, we'll connect with you online. Tell us where people can find you so that they can learn more about the services that you're offering.
Sure. So they can visit my website, www.cravehro.com. And I would love to connect on LinkedIn as well.
Brilliant. So we do a search. So it's Nicola Craveiro on LinkedIn. Crave HRO. Nicole. Oh my goodness. Nicole. Yeah, yeah, just a great big thank you. Thank you for being vulnerable and willing to share that story with us. And
You for hearing
Yeah.
it.
yeah, we wish you every success in your future endeavors.